In Orkney, we used to have an expression, "I'll be hour with the moon," meaning that I would come and visit you when the moon is full to light my way. Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Hour with the Moon. And this time, we have got a visitor here. And, it's not just any visitor. It's me old pal Terry Gunnell, doing for Iceland. And so welcome, Terry.
Thanks for inviting me. Wonderful to be here.
It's fabulous to have you.
And especially if your listeners could see these surroundings. This is wonderful. These books.
Yeah, well, there's one or two indeed. Terry asked me the other day when he came in if I read. I went, I dabble. Basically, we've got books with a bit of a hush around it. But anyway, it's good to have you. And you're retired now.
Yes, I am. Yes, I took 2 years back.
But explain to the people out there who maybe don't know who you are as to what you did.
Right. So I was, I replaced somebody called Jon David Lathesteinsson in folkloristics back in 1998. At that time, I'd been teaching English in a college. And I'd been doing quite a lot of work on folklore. I was telling stories and talking about Vikings and old Norwegian folklore in Norway for tourists. And I'd done my thesis about the performance of Viking poetry, really. But to look at that, I needed to look at all of the traditions that I could find in Scandinavia, which involved people putting on costumes and masks. And that, among other things, led me to Shetland, and to take a look at the skecklers and grollicks and the geysers that they have there. And so the people in the University of Iceland, in their infinite wisdom, decided to accept a foreigner into the position. And so I taught there in folkloristics until just 2 years back. And now I'm an emeritus. Which means I don't have to mark any more essays, and I don't have to go to meetings about money. And
you just get to do the good stuff.
I just do the good stuff. I wake up slower in the morning. I've got the Orkney saga here to read when I wake up tomorrow morning. I'm living a life.
I'll be asking questions about that later.
You do that.
Yeah. You need to brush it up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure you'll read it all in one morning.
Oh, I'll do my best. But yeah, so that's the background. And for me, I was teaching a whole range of courses, especially courses on Old Norse religion and mythology. And that I did all the way through when we were getting sort of up to 80 students on that, both local and international. And then there was another course introducing exchange students to Icelandic into identity, which means there was festivals in the background and so on. And then legends and traditions, both Scandinavian, Scottish, and Icelandic. And then I realized, because I've been doing stuff on old folklore, but also I was looking at school traditions, graduation traditions, again with masks. I was looking at the... I was asked to do a lecture about the hidden people of Reykjavik, and I was getting so tired of doing lectures about the hidden people, the elves and so on, that I decided to do it about the Vietnamese and their traditions. So it meant me going home to see what festivals they had, how they saw the world, and how they have a kitchen god in the corner that they give gifts to. They send gifts to other relations who've died. And of course, when you move between countries as a refugee, you have the question, for example, somebody in the family dies, you can't really have a funeral as you would do at home. Like if you're Hindu, for example, no one's burying, burning bodies outside. But it's something that really is important for closure. So I was interested in looking at all of that as well. But all of it, when it comes down to it, is about something I see you do extremely well, which is performance. Storytelling is, as we talked about before, all about performance when it comes down to it. It's not just the words, it's the rhythm you have, it's the eye contact, it's where the storyteller sits in the room, the surroundings, what the audience knows that you're playing off their keyboard to a certain extent. And the same thing with Guising traditions, the same thing with even boat building. It's all about performing and getting something said and something received, and it's a shared thing. Because my background's in drama and theatre arts. This is partly why I do this. So that's what I was doing drama since I was a kid, about 7. And that's what I did at university, was drama and theatre arts. But I think almost everything that I've been looking at in folkloristics these days is connected to performance. And of course, when it comes down to it, we're also looking at how, unfortunately, certain politicians perform and whether they can perform or not. But this is, again, something that we can give. We study performance.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that with dictators in the last century. Mussolini and Hitler actually went to learn how to do the gestures and the body language from drama.
Exactly. And, Hitler's doing in front of a mirror all of the moves, and I'm sure there's a number of people that we know who shall remain nameless at the moment who are doing exactly the same thing, except their mirrors are usually gold-plated.
Indeed. And a few wannabes on the side.
Absolutely.
But the reason that you're down here at the moment is for the Orkney International Science Festival, which just started yesterday. That's, for at the moment where we are, not for people who are listening to this, obviously. But this year is the bicentenary of the birth of a man who was actually very important for me, is a guy called Walter Traill Dennison, who was a folklorist in Sandy, who gathered a lot of the folk tales that we have here. And it was kind of his fault that I got so deeply into Sandy. I had been doing storytelling before that, but then I kind of got dragged deeper into it because of him. Long story, won't go into it, but so we're kind of celebrating that, but we're also looking at similarities between folk tales that he gathered and other people gathered in Orkney, and where you're at as well in Iceland or the North Atlantic Islands or Scandinavia as a whole. So, I mean, do you think that the similarities between the stories from Orkney and Iceland, do you see similarities?
I think, first of all, we can come on to some of that afterwards, because we're starting this database, we're opening this database of as many Orcadian legends as we can get hold of. But it's Dennison collecting, I think, is particularly interesting when he's put into the context of folklore collection. We had there's a project I've been meaning to work on for many, many years before, which is exactly what started people collecting legends, which are the stories told by, on the whole, working class people, the stories of working class people are being put into upper middle class libraries like Walter Scot, for example, which is pretty political when it comes down to it. It's suddenly the voice of, and why the voice of the working classes? It's because it was believed that the national spirit lived within the working classes, not within the upper classes who were hanging around with all sorts of people, French, and trying to copy them. Whereas the working classes have passed on ballads and stories and things that go a long way back. And the beginning of this are the Grimm brothers, but not the Grimm's Kinder and Hausmärchen, the fairy tales, which are said to be for children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way that they were received. Like, these are children's stories, international children's stories. But more the collections of legends that they did, which has stories like William Tell and Barbarossa and other people in there, that the book is called Deutsche Sagen, Legends of the Germans. So suddenly we get a national name put onto it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because right across Europe at this time, the world of Romanticism, we've got nations who have been under other nations who are looking for independence. And to be independent of a country, an empire like France or England or Sweden, you've got to be able to stand alongside them in terms of saying we have our own culture, not just our history, but we have a culture. And we can open up theatres and galleries and things of this kind along with the others. So what followed Deutsche Sagen, almost 2 years later, is Danske Sagen, which the Danish legends. And the Danes were very upset about the fact that the Grimms were including Danish legends in their book, partly because the Grimms believed that Denmark should be divided up and Jutland given to Germany and then Zealand given to the Swedes. So the Danes were very annoyed about this, and so this guy goes out, collects stories. He stays in the nicest of houses, by the way, and he's looking for women at the same time, Utila. And then he publishes his collection. Very soon after this, there's a Swede who collects Swedish legends and wants to underline in his introduction that these are a lot better than the Danish legends that you can find. Straight after this,
I can just hear it.
Yeah. The Norwegians have to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, in Ireland, they're doing the same, collecting Irish legends, or what they call fairy stories, which are actually stories about fairies rather than fairy stories as we see them.
Yeah.
Croft and Croker. And then in Scotland, we've got John Francis Campbell, who's doing all of the collection of wonder tales, mainly sort of copying the Norwegians who'd done Alfredson and Moa, had done fairy tales. But he also collects a lot of legends. And then in Iceland, 1862-64, Campbell comes to Iceland and meets the Icelandic collector. And they talk about geology. He describes Iceland as being like a big Birmingham engine for some reason. He's more interested in engines than fairy tales when he gets there. But Icelandic legends. So we have Orcadian legends, in a sense, being collected by Dennison. And in Shetland, we've got, is it Edmondson? Maybe, or Saxby and Edmondson.
Yeah, and like Jesse Saxby.
Yeah, exactly.
Was right. Very, very important, and gathering stories as well.
So there's a need
again from a well-off family.
Oh, absolutely.
So these are not working class people gathering other working class people's stories.
No.
They are people of a professional class or landed,
right?
Who are doing the collecting.
So exactly. So they're interested in the working class world. But yeah, Dennison is to show what is an Orcadian. How is an Orcadian different to a Scot? To a certain extent. And figures like in Norway, Askeladden is seen as being the typical Norwegian. And it's Askepattel, I suppose it's the same sort of idea.
Yeah, and the one thing that is just heartbreaking for me is when you read Dennison's papers from the Scottish Antiquary, and he was talking about Askepattel and the Stoorworm, and then says, well, of course, there was lots of stories about Askepattel in Orkney, full stop. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Come on, spill the beans. But no, there was lots of stories, but because he didn't write them down, we don't know them.
No, exactly.
Hello, friends. Just a reminder of how you can support our heritage work and help it to continue. Subscribing, comments, and positive reviews from wherever you listen will help other listeners to find us too. And sharing the podcast on social media is always helpful. You might also consider purchasing Orkneyology Press books and products from our Orkneyology.com website, which is also where you can find the show notes for this podcast. All of these are a great help. And if you're able, you might consider buying us an occasional dram. This is from our Ko-fi page, and you can find it at ko-fi.com/Orkneyology. We really appreciate your encouragement in any way you give it, even if it's just sending warm thoughts our way. Thank you so much. Enjoy the podcast.
So it's a period of searching for identity. And the other interesting side of it is that these are local stories in Iceland and Norway, but they're being now stamped as being Norwegian. So they're being taken away from the area. Here they're being taken away from the islands. Although, does he stress the difference between the islands, or are they Orcadian?
No, he doesn't. He refers to, and an old saying was all the broken islands of Orkney. And, but he realized that there was things going on through rising sea levels, coastal erosion. So he, that's the broken islands of Orkney wasn't because it was politically or socially broken. It was just, they were literally broken by the sea.
And in a sense, culturally broken too? Is there a need to sort of stand up and say, we have a culture?
Well, I think that you're kind of asserting your Nordicness against the Scots,
Yes.
and nothing, against Scots, obviously. But in his age and at his time, people again were kind of looking to their cultural identity. This is us. We are part of Scotland now, but we didn't used to be. We used to be part of Norway, and you get that kind of romanticism of really wanting to be a Viking, which then Shetland does so well with the creation of Up Helliar, which was based around a Celtic fire festival originally. But then you start having longships and geyser jarls and so it's a reinvention and a kind of a reestablishing your cultural identity and what you think is important.
Right. Yeah. And again, how we're different to other people that we are. So Dennison, he's certainly part of that wave. He's right at the end of the cultural tsunami of legend collecting. And after this, then the subject starts becoming a university subject here and there as well. But these are the first collectors. And he uses dialect too, doesn't he?
He was the very first man to write an Orkney dialect. 1872, I think it was, which was, he released a little booklet. And the one was, called I think it was the version that he used there was called The Adventures of Lady Sarah, which was then later, I think, Lady Sarah's Voyage. But that wasn't in dialect. But then he had another one with it. I think it was Petty Torrell's Trevelia, which Trevelia is a violent fall. And it's about a guy that's climbing up on the roof of his girlfriend's house to look down the smoke hole to see if her parents has gone to bed yet, and gets a bit too far forward and falls down into the fireplace. And there's a big pot over the fire, and he knocks out in the fire so that the light goes out, and there's also this big cloud of steam and ash.
Yeah.
And then he emerges from it with a pot on his head, which has got legs, it's called a three-toed pot. So it's got these two legs that curl up like horns, this big round head with two horns sticking up. So they, of course, naturally assume it's the devil. And so it's a comic tale, but the first time that Orkney folk dialect had been used. And then when he comes out with the Orcadian sketchbook in 1880, it's most of the stories are in dialect. And then there's a glossary of words in the back, which is the first collection of Orkney dialect words to be printed as well. So he was a bit of a pioneer at that time.
But because it was not me interviewing you for a while, but I'm learning so much while I'm here. So when he's writing in dialect, is he writing has he got a set Orcadian dialect that he's using, rather than having different Westray, Papa?
Basically, what he's writing in is 18th century Sandy.
Yeah.
Because the stories that he is hearing, or that he remembers hearing when he's young, are from old people who were born in the 18th century.
Okay.
It's their dialect.
So so there will be different dialects in the way that the stories are written down.
No, I mean he's writing in like Sandy dialect, but a lot of it is actually very old Sandy dialect, because he's getting stories from old people, and he's just kind of writing down verbatim what they've said.
Yeah.
So
because it's particularly interesting in terms of Norway. Well, I think actually all of the countries, well they're now creating national collections.
Mm-hmm.
But in Norway, for example, if you write a story down as they were told, nobody will understand a word of it. There were so many different dialects of Setesdal, for example. Even nowadays, no one can understand a word unless you read it out loud. So in a sense, what they did was they created, because Norwegian, written Norwegian was basically Danish. And there was an attempt to create a nynorsk, a new Norwegian. Mm-hmm. But even that was standardizing. And they made sure that everybody could read the stories, which was sort of interesting in itself. And this is, again, the same sort of thing maybe here, that they are, but they certainly wrote down expressions, things that were said that they wanted put into the stories.
Yeah. I mean, Dennison recorded traditions and customs as well relating to marriage customs and death customs. Which is, we were talking last night about the Varden, for instance, which is this animal spirit that follows you around in life, but you are unaware of it. But when somebody was about to die, you would hear the Varden would be howling. It would be like a dog howling. And then you would hear this padding of like a dog's footsteps going from the house where the person was, lived, and heading towards the kirkyard, towards the grave. But I mean, a lot of these things, it's, that's the only mention of them, which of course makes you wonder whether it's just a weird one-off thing, or was that a widely used tradition that nobody else wrote down at the time because nobody else saw it as being relevant, Hard to say.
And in the case of that, certainly the name is Norwegian without any question. So Vardø in Norway is a following spirit, but everything you're describing otherwise is very much like the Banshee, which is going to be, I suppose, the islands, the Hebrides. I'm sure they have a sort of Banshee figure there that you hear calling, whereas Norway doesn't really have that in the same way. Because one of the wonderful things about Orkney is this mixture of ideas coming in from different periods, it seems.
Well, I mean, we're kind of at that cultural crossroads between the Scandinavian and Celtic worlds.
Right. Yeah.
So there is, influence from both sides. And I like to think of it as just pure old 100% homegrown Orcadian as well, stories like Finn folk and the Mother of the Sea, which I mean is a myth.
Yes.
I mean that must be ancient.
Yeah, well, I think definitely. And again, we have parallels in Iceland in the Mother of the Salmon, the Mother of the Trout, the Mother of the. It's never the Mother of the Sea on its own, but it's a mother who's associated with water. But yes, it's as it is. It's Orcadian. Its version here is its.
Yeah, because I mean, you get Mother Earth, but you would get Mother Sea here, because I mean, the sea is just such a hugely important part of life. Even if you're not a fisherman, it's still, you're surrounded by the stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think from different periods too, as we've been talking a lot about Orcadian legends, and in a sense, there seem to be different sorts of period. You can almost date some of them, especially the ones that are very Nordic, let's put it that way. They almost certainly would going back to 500 years with all the influence coming in from Norway, although that influence would still have been coming to a certain extent with the Hansa men when they're sailing up here, getting sailors from Norway, but nonetheless. But it's interesting that we don't find the same witch stories here that we find in Norway, but much more a sort of James VI idea of witches sinking ships. This sort of idea, and the evil of the supernatural, which you don't really find in other countries in the same way. But the Lutheran Church, do you call it Lutheran here or Calvinist?
Well, here it would be mostly, which would be referred to as Presbyterian, because it's a Presbyterian church.
Yeah.
But Protestant,
right,
we would say, rather than Lutheran.
Right, but a strong influence, a strong emphasis on evil. Having a Bible with you wherever you go, and a sort of silver money in your pocket in case you bump into a thin person, right? They're quite fond.
They are fond of the white money, as they call it, the silver. But that's usually if you have to bribe them to take you home or something. But I mean, we had legends, like the Book of the Black Arts. Do you have that in?
Oh, the Black Book.
Iceland, yeah.
Yeah, but very differently. The Icelandic stories are very much like the Norwegian and Danish stories, which are a priest going off to study in the Black School in Wittenberg. And then he has to escape from the devil. Sometimes gets the devil to take his shadow, says, grab what's behind the person behind me. And he never has a shadow afterwards.
So that was Sigmund, or was it not?
Yeah, he's definitely one of them. But
he was a real character?
Yeah, historically, absolutely. So he's the oldest of these figures. And he was Catholic.
What century was
this is about 1100. So he does study abroad, but there's a saga which describes how he's saved from some weird astronomer by Saint John. Jonas is coming home from France somewhere, or Rome, and helps this priest escape from Simon de Frode is his name, Simon de the Wise. Escape from a magician by hiding himself under some water so it looks like he's drowned, hiding himself under some earth so it looks like he's dead. But then the stories start taking later on this general Scandinavian idea, which also touches on Orcadian stories, which is that Simon did, like a guy called Peter Dass in Norway and others, he's trying to travel from one country to the next. He's trying to get from Copenhagen back to Iceland, where he's been told that there is a parish waiting for him if he can get there fast. So he has to be there in a couple of days, and he calls on the devil, and the devil says, I'll take you, no problem. But if you get your feet wet, I'll get your soul. And everything's going perfectly until they're just off the shore, and that's when Simon reads from his psalter, and it shocks the devil, who drops him in the water, and he gets there safely. But the Norwegian versions tell how a Norwegian priest who's up in Trondheim has been invited to hold a sermon in Copenhagen the next day. And he says, I could do anything like this if I want. And he calls on his helper, and the devil appears and carries him off to Copenhagen. Then basically he has to be able to hold this sermon. And if anybody falls asleep in the audience, in the congregation, or the sermon doesn't work, the devil will get his soul. And Peter goes up into the pulpit. He has sees a piece of paper on the pulpit, which should be his sermon, and there's nothing on it, nothing on the other side. And then he says and in the beginning was nothing, and out of nothing came the world. And then that goes on, and nobody falls asleep at all in the sermon. But this is the same story. There's two versions I've seen from here. The Trondheim, a guy getting back from Trondheim to Orkney, and another one is getting from Shetland to Orkney, and is carried in some way by somebody calls on some spirit to carry him. Does not ring a bell.
No, I can't say it does ring a bell.
Oh, this is wonderful. You see your brow furrowing here. Yeah. I found 2 stories that you don't ring a bell. But yeah, it's very different. It's somebody who wants to get back here for Christmas.
Well, there is the one about the guy from Faraklet in Rousey that is in Norway, and then his ship gets wrecked on the coast of Shetland, but he gets taken in by a Finn wife.
Here you go.
Who is... Well, the story that Dennison had, which, to be honest, I find kind of hard to believe. I think it's maybe a bit mixed up, but that the mermaids were the women folk of the Finn folk.
Mm-hmm.
And they're young and beautiful. They don't necessarily have fish's tails. They've got a beautiful petticoat that they can tie over their feet, so when they're swimming in the sea, then it looks like a tail. But then if they marry a Finn man, they will progressively lose their looks every 7 years. So you go from being just the most stunningly beautiful creature ever to being just like a beautiful woman, and then to becoming, a kind of a plain
old crone
woman, and then you start, becoming this ancient hag, for want of a better word, who then travels around as a witch.
Mm-hmm.
And whichever place she's in, she always says she comes from the neighbouring place. So if she was in Orkney, she would say, I'm from Caithness, or I'm from Shetland. If she was in Shetland, I'm from Orkney.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where he gets taken in by her, and he's miserable because it's coming up for Christmas, and he needs to, he's wishing he was back home. And she says, what's troubling you? And he said, well, my wife doesn't even know if I'm alive or dead, and I've got no way of getting back. And she says, I bet you'd give anything you like, to get home for Yule. Mm. And oh, God, yeah, give anything. Even the best coup in the byre, absolutely, yeah. And then he wakes up in the morning, and his wife realizes that there's a man in bed alongside her snoring, and she starts to batter him. And then he recognizes his wife's voice and realizes he's home. But then he says, but you might not like the price I've had to pay for this. And of course they go out and the coup's gone. But a friend of his says that he was in Shetland that summer, and he knew the coup, and it was tethered outside this old woman's house. But yeah, we've got that.
Yeah. And again, it's Nordic, Orcadian. It's shared. It's part of a shared culture. But in each country, it's adapted to the local surroundings. Like the cow here, the spey wife. There is another very, very similar version, which is even closer to that, which is that somebody is in Oslo, trying to get home in Western Norway, and then somebody says, "Why are you crying?" Because I can help you with this, and then they fly across, and he can describe the mountains that he flies across getting home. But yeah, here's the spey wife, and here's a cow, and so you pay for your trips here. There's a strong sense of duty amongst the Orcadians about paying bus fares.
We always pay our debt.
That's how. But this is what we've been finding in these discussions, and for me, coming here has meant reading everything. Every book I can get hold of, including a number of books by this magnificent Mr. Muir.
Oh, that prick.
That guy.
Well, and wouldn't believe anything you read of him.
And it's partly associated with another project that we've been doing, which is we started creating a database of Icelandic legends, which we call Sagnagrunnet, and the Icelandic word for database is Gagnagrunnet. So we used Sagn, which means legend, instead. So Sagnagrunnet. And that was partly because it's the same situation as here as in Shetland. Although, yeah, I suppose the School of Scottish Studies has their archive now. Iceland had no archive. It had masses of folktale collections, which followed up the first collection from 1862-64. But the Icelanders were not interested in referring to each other. Say this is the same story as found in another book. And they certainly weren't interested in saying it's a story that you also find in Denmark, Because if according to an Icelander, if a story is found in Denmark, it's come from Iceland, no question. I mean, these Norwegian versions up here, it's got away from the Norwegians. Which I suppose is a similar attitude around here. Maybe it all starts in Orkney, doesn't it?
Well, everything did. I mean, life evolves in Orkney. We all know that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did with my students was put together a database of all the legends in print that we could find, and that has details then about the book it comes from, the storyteller, whether they're male, female, and same with the collectors, where the stories take place, where the collectors lived, and so on, or the storyteller lives. And then a whole part of keywords that we put together as well, so we can start comparing. And then also these migratory legend numbers, which are numbers that in Norway they put together numbers for different types of story, which have been developed here and there elsewhere later on. So basically, at last, we had just summaries of stories. We didn't have the complete story, partly because that would take too long. And we didn't want it to replace the books. We wanted to encourage people to use the books.
Mm-hmm.
So we put down, there's about 10,000 legends, which it was searchable.
Mm-hmm.
What I always wanted to do was to connect it to a map. And Iceland was one of the few places that you could, along with Dick Cheney's office, I gather, in America, that wasn't on Google World or Google Maps. Mm-hmm. Dick Cheney made sure you couldn't see his office in Washington. But Iceland also didn't have any, they didn't want to let anybody have access to this. But then there's a student of mine, Traill Dennison, who had been doing some mapping, and I took him on for an MA project to link this to maps. And then suddenly you can now, from this, you can see how a story spreads around the country. You can go to a postman, for example, and you can see his stories all along his postal route. Women, just two places in Iceland because they didn't travel much. But that's where they came from and the place that they went to. So you can see their areas of stories in each case. And that's what I always wanted to widen this out, because I've been doing work with Shetland quite a lot. I wanted to get Faroese material in there. And certainly I wanted to get the Orcadian material in there. And so we were given a grant by the University of Iceland Science Council Fund. And then the University of Highlands and Islands gave us 5,000 quid to sit and put everything. And along with this, then in Iceland, they'd connected the printed legend database to the sound legend, which has all recordings that are online. So from that, you could go out to a farm. You could stand by the farm. You could listen to a story that's being told by somebody who lived there. Which brought a different feeling to the surroundings, like we've been seeing today as we've been driving around here. The history that lives here, the stones that go hopping down to the water, which I love the idea of. And in a sense, what we're doing is bringing the stories back to the local surroundings. The ness that the story comes from, the bay that's out there, the connections between different islands. So we have, I think, getting towards about 800 narratives from here, which we've also got from Shetland earlier on. And we're taking the stories back to the local surroundings, and to the people, and to the recordings that are on the I can't say it probably, Toba and Dan Dualkis or something, Kista Riches, which is the sound recordings that School of Scottish Studies have made available. So again, you can go to places around Orkney and listen to the stories that come from there with all of these pretty famous storytellers. So for me, it was just a matter of now reading through this myself and just sinking myself into the stories that you've collected over time and the others. And it's been wonderful. That's a long talk, so you can talk a bit now.
Oh, that's all right, man. That's what you're here for. Well, let you get a slug of your dram.
That's about telling your audience what we're doing here.
Oh, they know.
So where are we going to go from there? So,
well, the one thing that I thought was interesting was, like I mentioned, the Book of the Black Arts,
yes,
which was a book that was black pages with white writing on it.
Yeah.
And it contained spells.
Yep.
And it was supposed to be written in hell by a devil, maybe not the devil, not the boss man, but, one of his admin staff or whatever. But if you had that, then obviously it gave you power.
Mm-hmm.
But if you died with it in your possession, you and the book went back to its author. And so you couldn't get rid of it. It could not be destroyed. Mm-hmm. You could throw it over a cliff. It'll be back in its usual place before you get home. You try to bury it, it's back in its usual place. You try to burn it, it doesn't burn. You try to tear it up, it doesn't tear. Mm. And you take it out into the middle of the sea in a boat, in a sack that's stored in the bottom, throw it over the side, it's back before you. And the only way to be rid of it is to sell it for a silver coin of a lesser value than the one you paid for it. Mm-hmm. So back in the 19th century, if you got down to a threepence, or a threepenny bit, 3 pennies, small silver coin, that's the smallest silver coin there was, you're screwed, But there are 2 ministers that are said to have taken it and destroyed it. The one was the Reverend Charles Clouston, who was the minister for Sandwich. And he obtained the book I've heard versions of a story that they paid with an old coin that was no longer in currency, which meant that, technically the worth of silver might be more, but it didn't have any monetary value as far as a coin for spending goes. And he buried it in the garden of Flotterstone, his manse, with a Bible on top of it, filled it in, and it remained there, and it's still there, according to legend. And I really would advise anybody in Sandwich, don't go and try to dig it up. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
The other one was the Reverend Matthew Armour in Sandy, a man who Dennison actually had fallen out with because he was an unconventional preacher, free church minister, but very dramatic. An old cousin of my dad, old Daffod Touré, said, one minute he was crouching down low, and the next minute he was flickering up and chomping up like a teak, and it's like, oh, okay. So overly dramatic, which Dennison and his brother didn't like much. But a man that was respected, he stood up for the Crofters during the Crofters Commission, and was arrested for public affray in Kirkwall, and locked up, and there was going to be like a riot, and then the word was spread the minister's out, so he was released. But he died in 1903. But he took the Book of the Black Arts and was able to burn it. They said it burnt with a black sulphurous smoke. But it shows that these men were regarded as being so holy, It's almost like a Presbyterian saint, which is a complete oxymoron. But, it's they had the power to overcome the devil and his works.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's black books. They're all over the place in Scandinavia. They've actually got copies of them. And they are, as you say, spells. In them, usually runic inscriptions and things of this kind. Usually to help get rid of illnesses and things like this, or sometimes to try and get something back that's been stolen from you. Nothing, very little about actually calling up the devil to be your friend. But the stories usually are associated with Simon Dud, as you mentioned. He's the oldest. But they're always Lutheran priests. And the stories are clearly even being told about them while they're alive. that they've got hold of these books from going to Wittenberg to study there. And so in a sense, they are almost regarded as being friends of the devil, but they never go to hell. But if there are stories about the end of it, they get away from it. They outwit the devil again. And it's just trying to work out what exactly is going on with priests and the big black book. And the most obvious thing, of course, is the Bible, and especially if they got the Latin Bible. And people look at the book, and it's written in a strange language. That's where all of his power, he'll say, comes from, are these stories as he's up there on the pulpit. And he can see the devil behind this person here and the devil behind that person, and they will burn in hell. And then he'll come, and then everybody goes back home, and there's no devil anymore. The devil only appears whenever the priest does. As soon as he enters the room, you're thinking of dancing again, you're all going to go to hell. So he's an outsider to start off with. I'm sure that must be the same here. He's an outsider. His wife is an outsider, often gets accused of being a witch. Because the women in the community look down on her for speaking differently and not doing work like they have to do. But he is regularly then seen as being somebody who can outwit the devil who has the black book. Well, it's different. It's a priest, but at the same time, there's a lot more stress on the horrific, the smell of sulfur. I love.
Well, I'm not sure where Matthew Armour came from, but I mean, with a name like Armour, you'd think it was kind of Central Belt or Argyll or something like that. Charles Clouston, he's Clouston. I mean, Clouston is a district in Stennis. And his dad, William, was the minister for Sandwich and Stromness before him. So, an old Orkney family. So by no means an outsider, but somebody that was tremendously respected and was, thought, well, he can defeat the devil. Rather than having something belonging to the devil, which he's using,
Yeah. Well, often in Scotland, too, if they do talk about learning abroad, then it tends to be in France or Italy, whereas in Scandinavia, it tends to be in Wittenberg again, which is where Luther comes from. But again, it's almost the way that the priest is presenting himself. Almost passing on the stories that they have the power to save you. Well, they have the keys. But they'll underline, I have the keys to get you into heaven or hell. I can decide. That's something else that gives them quite a lot of power. But it is interesting how widespread it is. And certainly in Iceland too, in that sense. So yeah, you've got, again...
What other stories from here do you find parallels for in Iceland, or...?
It's usually motifs as much as anything else, because what's clearly happened in both places is that the story has adapted itself to the way that people think in a particular country.
And maybe the landscape too.
Right, absolutely. So Iceland, for example, doesn't have stories about witches. Partly because women never lived alone on the outside of the community. They would always be living with other people. They were not alone to be accused of this. More on male magicians. But this thing, if we go on to sea creatures are interesting. We certainly have a selkie, but only two stories. The Icelanders keep underlining that story because it's so well told. Like the stories here, but actually it's only in a couple of places. We have things called beach creeps, which you go wandering along the beach and you hear this sort of thing clumping behind you. And that's a beach creep, but it's not in the water.
And what do they look like? Or...
Well, they're horrible. They're sort of a mixture of seal and walrus and dead body, really. Rather disgusting things. Sometimes called seamen, sometimes called ocean figures. But I like the word beach creep. It's fjörðarlalli, as they're called in Icelandic. And we have mermen, which little guys who are under the water and someone's out fishing with a rod and they suddenly find themselves being brought out of the water when they were repairing their chimney under the water. and brought back to land, and it's the story of the three laughs.
And what's that?
The first one, I think, is there are three things. Yes, is as they come onto land, he laughs when the dog comes up to the farmer, and the farmer can't work out this dog's been my friend forever. And then he kicks over a tussock, and the man laughs again because he's just ignored it. And the third one is his wife comes and gives him a kiss, and the merman laughs a third time, and then he wants to know afterwards why, what's all of this? And I think he kicked the dog, and the dog was actually his best friend when it turned into. And his wife is the one who cheats on him, and what he kicked over was a treasure mound, and he'll never find it again. So it's the three laughs. And in Ireland, it's a leprechaun, and again in Iceland, it's turned into something different. Just think of other sorts of stories. You're going to help me with a theme.
Well, the Selkie one, because that's an old favourite of mine.
Exactly, and it's exactly the same there. Yeah.
But it's man meets boy meets Selkie. Boy steals Selkie skin.
Right, which is not romantic when it comes down to it. Right, she doesn't get much choice in the matter. Let's put it that way.
No.
And a number of women would have recognised that story of being sort of married off to somebody that you've never met before. So I think maybe that's so. It's quite romantic on one side.
Losing your identity.
Yeah. But it ends up very sad, of course. Either he loses his kids or she loses her kids, and there's a strong element there.
I mean, there's a Faroese version as well, which once she goes back to the sea, he's out killing seals, and she comes back as a troll, as this terrifying figure that comes in and identifies body parts of various friends or family members of her, which is a very different element from in Orkney.
Yeah.
But the initial story is exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we centrally have land nature spirits in the same way, but they are that you depend on, that you show respect for, and that's the Norwegians do as well, except the Norwegians have given them tails and made them more sort of bestial. In Iceland, they're just pretty good looking. They all look like, I don't know what to say these days. For my generation, Brad Pitt, I suppose, back in the past. Or sort of Joey and Friends, sort of how you're doing idea. And they sort of chat up women. But we know that when they came to Iceland, they had this idea with them. They didn't call them elves. They didn't call them hidden people. They called them náttúruvættir, nature spirits, or landvættir. We hear about them in a very early law, which says you must take the dragon heads off your ships, because otherwise you'll frighten the spirits away. And we have a number of other stories. Egill Skallagrimsson, the saga hero, he curses this Norwegian king, Eric of Bloodaxe, by saying that the nature spirits of the country will throw you out. Sticks a horse head on a pole and points it at the land. And yes, he gets thrown out. So these ideas of nature spirits are very, very old. And the same ideas of figures living on inside grave mounds, we find them in the sagas all over the place. And the same idea of children and women being taken away by sometimes trolls, but sometimes just the hidden people, into another world.
So like changelings.
Yeah, changelings everywhere, absolutely. They don't actually drink whiskey and play bagpipes like they do in Scotland. I don't think your Orcadian ones play bagpipes, do they?
No, they don't. They don't play it's a little whistle he plays it with a piece of straw.
All right, yeah.
But yeah, drinks plenty of whiskey.
He does. Yeah. There you go.
But start them young, I say. But
of course, these stories are, in many ways, like so many stories are, without putting down the belief, there is always a danger when you're working on a farm like you are here. You've left the children somewhere to play, and what might happen. And anybody who's had a child with colic will understand the idea that suddenly this beautiful child is just screaming endlessly all the time. And what's happened? What's happened to my child? So, but here also, it's more often also women being stolen, or they die, and they die into the fairy world.
Yeah, they get carried away by the fairy folk, and a stock left in their place. So a piece of wood that is bewitched.
Yeah.
To look exactly like them lying dead in the bed. So you take away the piece of wood and you bury it. But meanwhile, she's in a fairy mound nursing a fairy child whose mother has died, or, so.
A midwife to the fairies, idea, to a certain extent,
Wet nurse to the fairies kind of thing, actually, literally.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, these are shared ideas, but I think these Norwegian, Icelandic motifs have to be very old. I know Alan Bruford in School of Scottish Studies wanted to argue that there were more Scottish stories here than Nordic. Not as far as I've seen.
I remember Boo talking about that as well. My old pal Boo Armquist, saying it. He used to argue with Alan Bruford about that because he would saying that there was, the stories from Orkney were all predominantly Scots, and he goes, No, they are not. They are Nordic, Scandinavian.
Yeah.
So,
no, exactly. But what's so interesting about that too is if we look at the time, the time pattern, then contact with Norway between Shetland and Norway stops really with the Black Death. Just to contact Norway could do very little for their colonies, if we call it that, and during that period. Orkney itself was suffering, as you've said, from the Black Death.
Oh yeah, I think it was 1349 it came here.
Right.
And went to Faroes the same year as well, possibly with the same ship.
Yeah.
Because, it would have been carried by a ship here. Yeah. The crew would have had it and passed it on. And, of course, it was so contagious. And people lived so closely by each other. And let's face it, the old personal hygiene wasn't its best either, So you were transmitting this very easily. But they say that in the old records for the taxation that was being paid to the Earl of Orkney, it was pre-Black Death, it was all in grain. And then post-Black Death, it was in animals, it was in cattle or sheep.
Because they'd lost so many.
Because they'd lost so many people, they couldn't plant the crop and harvest it.
Yeah.
So they were rearing animals instead because it wasn't so labor-intensive. So, and that's the only clue that we have as to how devastating it was here. But, it must have been.
And it's 100 years later that Orkney comes under Scotland. But there again, the Scots who are coming here are going to be essentially officials, I would reckon, at first, which are not going to be affecting the culture of the people themselves and the stories that they're telling much.
Yeah, you had to learn English.
Well,
Scots. Because you had to communicate with these people. Once Scotland took over, all the people in charge were Scottish, and also the ministers in the church. So you had to learn the language in order to communicate with those people who were above you, and obviously, if you can destroy a language, then you're halfway to winning the battle of, destroying a culture.
No, exactly. So I think this this is maybe why the devil stories are becoming more from Scotland, and the priest passing them on as much as anything else. But again, we've talked about the Hugboon, or how do you pronounce it again?
Hogboy.
Hogboon. Without any question, is something that's come initially from Norway. But the interesting element is that it lives on. The stories live on in Orkney. They don't come to Iceland. We don't have ideas of old ancient grave mounds which are inhabited by a particular spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it that it comes to Orkney and Shetland to some degree, but less?
Mm-hmm.
The Norwegians, who are bound by law in giving gifts to grave mounds, in 12th century, 13th century law, which means that they were doing it. Other laws which say that they believe in the grave mound suggest the same sort of idea. It's a holy place for the farm. And they come here, and of course there are grave mounds here.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do with a local grave mound? You give things to it.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I love all the accounts about giving milk and buttermilk and especially wine. Your nature spirits have got class.
Oh, yeah. They're classy wee devils.
Ah.
Probably should explain for anybody that's kind of going, what the hell are they talking about? A hogbone or hogboy was a spirit that lived in the mound that brought luck to the farm as long as you shared the produce of the farm with it. So you pour milk over the mound, or ale, or butter, or corn. If you're grinding bare meal, you'd put some of that on it. Or if you're baking bannocks, you'd leave a bit of that on for them to eat. Mm-hmm. And so it was, as long as you shared the produce of the farm with your hogbone, you were okay. As soon as you start to neglect them, they get really annoyed and start making your life hell. So it's best to keep on the right side of them.
The Norwegian stories about this figure, the god Vålerydningskarl or Høgboe. Like if you sleep too long, he'll wake you up in the morning by sort of kicking you, telling you you're lazy. If you sleep in his bed, and he has a bed kept in many houses, you'll suddenly find yourself on the floor in the middle of the night. You get back into the bed next time you hit the wall. And a third time you get into your bed and you're thrown down the stairs. But it's for you do not sleep in his bed. And if you do anything with his porridge, and occasionally there are people do rather nasty things to the porridge, like, I don't know, bad-tempered waiters do with the food that's delivered or something, I'm not sure. He gets really annoyed, and then he'll play volleyball with you over the house. So throwing you up one side, kicking you up the other side, and keeping that going for a while. And he was the one who protected the farm against the wild ride. You needed him. So he'll sort of stride down to the fence when the wild ride is coming, this little mighty man figure, and he'll fight them off. Could you
explain to people what the wild ride is?
Okay, the wild ride is wild ride is right across Scandinavia. We hear about the wild ride. In Denmark and Sweden, it's a hunt led by the god Odin. In Western Norway, which is the area we're connecting with, it's a bunch of the dead or trolls who are being led down from the mountains on horseback at Christmas time. And they will, if they catch you out on the street, they'll carry you across the landscape. And you'll see places you've never seen and describe them later on when you come back as you've been carried. They'll then take over farms as well. You find, if you go to any outdoor museum in Norway, you'll find tar crosses marked above all of the doors of the stable and the farm to protect you against the wild ride. So, and interestingly enough, in Western Norway, it's led by a woman, which is very much like in Iceland, the figure for Christmas is a woman. And if you go to Ireland, the figure for wintertime is a woman, the Kayak, which is Kettlingen again.
Yeah.
So she's belongs to that system. And I have a sneaking suspicion, I've been arguing here and there, that for some people, the year was divided into two. That summertime was men. This is a time for war, for market travel, and for law. Wintertime is when you move into the house. And this is, which the woman controls. She has the keys for the house. And you're moving into the darkness of inside, like the darkness of winter. At the beginning of winter, we have in Iceland women, spy wives, prophesying how the year is going to be. It's always women. And we have this Christmas figure at winter. And we have sacrifices at the beginning of winter, same time as Halloween, which are to female spirits. So there's a sense of the winter time is when everything is in the darkness in the earth, growing like it's inside the womb.
Right.
And everything sort of connects with women. So the knowledge of the past, knowledge of the future, and the new year, the crops then come out of the earth. So a lot of things point to this sort of idea. So the wild ride led by a woman at Christmas time, at winter time, who takes people, certainly fits into that sort of pattern. I don't think you've got any female nasty ladies riding around on horseback here, have you?
No, we don't. I mean, the only nasty horsebacky thing is the nuclavy, which is, well, I don't know if it's either male or female. It's just grotesque.
Yeah.
Sort of a figure growing out of the back of a horse that has a head that's way too big for its body. According to Dennison, it had a snout like a pig and a mouth as wide as a whale.
Okay. Wow.
But what was the worst thing about it, of course, is it had no skin on its body. And so there was just the raw flesh, and you could see the sinews twisting, sinews as thick as a horse tether, he says. When it moved, they twisted and writhed, and you could see the black blood coursing through its veins. You did not want to meet one of those on a dark night, or at practically any time.
Yeah, that's something that struck me. There's a lot of very ugly beings in Orcadian stories, and usually associated with the sea, but they're often very ugly. So you've got something about looks. You guys.
Well, sea trolls, but you never find any stories about sea trolls. But he said that they had a sort of sloping forehead and a face like a monkey. But they were covered with scales. And
this is what I mean. Yes, exactly.
They were being driven from the land by the land trolls, but they did like to sneak back ashore whenever they could. So they were like longing to go back to the land again, but the land trolls wouldn't allow it and drive them back into the sea. Said that they were very lazy, so they used to try to steal bait from fishermen's hooks, but they were so stupid and inept at it that they would get hooked themselves and get pulled up to the surface like your merman fixing his chimney. And then, much to the horror of the fisherman when he sees this scaly monkey face breaking the surface of the water and staring at him. Yeah.
It certainly strikes me, looking at these stories, that there's, as I mentioned the other day, that there's more sense of the sea being a threatening, evil place than I've seen, for example, in Norway or Iceland or Shetland. You could have a Bible with you when you go out to sea. You need to.
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a Bible with you, whatever you're doing, because, you had a Bible in a room with a woman when she'd had a baby to keep the trolls away. Yeah. And you always had a light burning in the room as well. And so when he died, there was always a Bible and a lit candle in the room. You never let it go out, because that was protecting it from evil spirits trying to carry away the soul. Because the soul was vulnerable. Just after death, it hadn't left the body still. It was still kind of quivering in there, thinking, what the hell has just happened? And it was very vulnerable to being snatched away by demons. So hence the bowl of salt on the chest, which was, different versions of that. The one was it was supposed to stop the body from swelling. Another one, I read a tradition from the Isle of Man, which was interesting because they mixed soil with the salt, and the soil was supposed to be like your body, made of clay. The salt represented your spirit. So that was set in a bowl on the chest of the dead person as well.
Wow. Now, in Iceland and Norway, usually it's silver or steel. I'd said much less mention of having books. Although I know that in Iceland there are manuscripts of the story of St. Margaret, which was published a tiny little book that women would keep on them when they were giving birth. So this is something that comes along later on. I think St. Anne is another one that was called on there.
We have 2 mollica beans upstairs, which were found by a friend of mine. I haven't found one, sadly, but they were found by a friend of mine, Rob Traill Thompson, on the Outer Homes in Stromness here.
Okay.
At different times, but they were also known as Mary beans, and you kept them with you. And it was given to women who were in labour because it was meant to ease labour pains. It was associated with the Virgin Mary. And if a woman held on to this Mary bean, then she wouldn't experience as much pain in childbirth.
Okay.
So a couple upstairs.
Yeah, these are the beans that sort of float you find by the sea.
Yeah, they come from the Caribbean.
That's right.
They come bobbing over from the Caribbean on the Gulf Stream.
Yes.
And get washed up. And I think they've got the same thing in Norway as well, because I remember being in Vesterålen on the islands there in the Arctic in Norway. And they were talking about the same thing. And I went, oh yeah, we got that too. And it's in the Western Isles,
Yeah, yeah. No, we have exactly the same thing, this idea of freeing the child, in a sense, within the womb. Right. I was thinking, of course, shared Iceland and here ghosts. The idea of ghosts are sort of very deeply rooted. And we did a folk belief survey in Iceland for the 3rd time just 2 years back. First one was done in 1974, next one was done in 2006 to 7. And then now we did one with 2,000 people of different ages, countryside, city. And while folk belief of the traditional kind is certainly decreasing, especially in the cities, the strongest beliefs are in the life after death, and that you can have contact with the dead, and that you can dream and you have contact with the next world as well. So these beliefs still live pretty strongly in Iceland.
So a lot of strong beliefs and dreams.
I'd say about 50% of the nation is saying that, yes, dreams tell you about something.
Rhonda will be happy with that.
Well, we were discussing it earlier on. Yeah, I just meet up with my wife. So but certainly it's the openness to so many of these things. People are scared of denying the existence of the hidden people, or these especially power points on almost every farm you must not touch, but certainly won't touch, just to find what will happen. And then we're talking again about 60% open to the idea of, they don't dare deny it. But especially the idea of premonition, the idea that you're born with a following spirit in some way or other. And we also asked about experiences, which was quite interesting. A lot of stories coming up about those figures. The hidden people, we mess with them. Yeah,
we had Ganfers here, which it's a strange kind of name, because there was a term which personally I never had used, was a Ganfer for snow. Meant that it was, it was setting up to snow. But a Ganfer was, kind of gang before, it's a ghost of a person who is still alive.
Ganfer, yeah, okay.
Who is about to die. And the earlier you see it in the day, the sooner death is. If you see it towards midday, they are going to die, but it will be a bit later. And I knew an old man in North Ronaldsay called Willie Thompson, better known as Willie and Even. And I had on a recording that he made in Radio Orkney that he had seen his granny's Ganfer when he was a pretty boy, because she was lying in bed, on her deathbed. And he said to his mother, "Oh, Granny's surely feeling better." And she said, "What makes you say that?" And he says, "I've just seen her go by the window." And the mother knew what that meant,
Mm-hmm.
that she was close to death, but not gone yet. Do you have that in Iceland?
Yeah, Iceland is strongly the idea of being feigur, which means it's very close to the word fey, like Morgan le Fay, and fate to a certain extent as well. And this is the idea that when you are feigur, you see it in the sagas a lot, then just everything will go wrong from the beginning of the day onwards. You'll fall over the cat, you'll burn your porridge, car won't start. All of the things that we recognize regularly, but not usually on the same day. But that suggests that, in a sense, like your protecting spirit has left you, a bit like rats leaving a sinking ship, basically. Because the idea was initially that everybody in Norway and elsewhere had a fylke, which is a spirit you're born with, which was initially an animal, and it's in the sagas. It's always a dream. It's always a dream figure, like the Golden Compass. That's it with you.
Yeah, Philip Pullman sort of played on that, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Animal spirits.
Yeah, so everybody there. Except I've never seen anybody with a ram or a mouse. You really want to have a wolf or a bear or something like this.
You want something badass. You don't want to. I've got a gerbil. I'll set me hamster on you. This is
Hedgehog.
well, at least they're prickly.
Yeah, but then it changes later on to sort of guardian angels in later times. But we have a lot of stories about family following spirits, which are usually figures that want revenge on you, either for denying, if it's a woman, denying herself to a guy who wants to curse you, or you refuse to take in somebody who's homeless and they end up dying outside, and then they come back and they will be with your family for 9 generations, basically. Sometimes they turn into a dog shape, but they are people. Most of the legends that we have recorded are memories of something going wrong before somebody arrives. And that it always happens in the local supermarket before this particular farmer comes. Then packets fall off the wall and break, bottles smash. And that's because they know, oh God, he's coming, he's going to be here in 5 minutes or so. And that's a sort of particularly Icelandic idea, because we don't have haunted houses, because houses didn't last very long. So we have haunted families instead. And what's interesting is that the 9 generations now are running out at last, so we're going to get rid of those beliefs. They all come from the same sort of period. But they are spooky.
And of course, you've got the same story that we have here as well about the unbaptized baby that haunts an area.
Absolutely. And what's so special about them is that, as a story, they tell of a woman who leaves a child out to die of exposure, because if it's admitted who she's had the child with, then she'll be drowned, basically, of having a child outside marriage. The guy's never, very rarely blamed for this. It's all her fault. She's a Jezebel-y figure. So she leaves the child out, and then she's about to head off to a dance. And then the spirit appears to her saying, sort of, mother mine and fold. So don't forget me, but you want to borrow my wrapping to go and make your dress out of when you go and dance tonight. And the stories all have the same sort of version of this. But there's never any law person in the story coming to punish her, which is particularly interesting, and never caught by the law. It's sometimes, again, a woman advisor who'll say what's going on. But the story is left for the woman herself to feel. The guilt is with her, which I find particularly interesting. The society which tells the story is not sort of legally blaming them. They understand the situation, and they also understand the guilt that's involved with this and what any woman must feel doing this. So you find similar sorts of stories right across Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Walking around Finland, I think it's a full set. The babies continue growing, and you're out walking somewhere, and suddenly this thing grabs you round the neck and says, "Daddy," as you're trying to walk home, which is the last thing you want to bump into.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have it here too.
We have 3 stories that I'm aware of. And the one which is the kind of most haunting really is a woman who was a farm servant, and she gets pregnant, and she has a baby, and she kills it and buries it on a mound. Presumably it's because people don't interfere with mounds. You know, if she can get off with burying it in the mound, then nobody's going to go and open the mound looking for it, you know.
No.
So, because you, of course, believe that there's fairies in there, so you leave it alone. And the bairn started haunting the area because it couldn't rest until it was given a name. Because they're very bureaucratic in heaven. And if you don't have a name, you can't get in. And so she, the baby haunts the area by weeping, going along the road crying. And one night there's a guy staggering home from the pub, and he hears this child coming weeping behind him on the road, and he says, how do I we a bear arse? So it's like, get off with you bear arse. And the weeping stopped, because the child has been given a name.
Yes.
Bear arse.
Yeah.
There was a version from Sandwich where that somebody says, slightly more sympathetically, what's wrong with your bareback? Now, I suspect that bareback is a sanitized version, because that's Choddy Marwick from Yesnavy that said that. And that was printed in the Orcadian newspaper in sort of turn of the century or so. I don't think that they would have, you know, it would have been bare arse as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But they've cleaned it up for the public, you know.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, my grandmother, Davina Drever in Westry, they used to, her and a friend was going home from school. There was a road that was supposed to be haunted by a baby. And they saw a white shape rise out of the road, which terrified them, coming home from school. And they ran home in a panic. And a minister went to speak to this apparition, and it was never seen again. But that's the story my mother told me.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but then we were talking about our old friend Bo Almquist, who's a Swedish scholar who was lived in Ireland. He was the
head of the Department of Irish Folklore in UCD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
highly respected man, and a great guy to hang out with as well.
He was known in Shetland as a Swede with a Carlsberg. I was told to take biscuits around, and he had a boot full of Carlsberg. We got all sorts of stories from there.
Well, not special brew, though.
No, I don't think so.
He was a great old guy. Yeah. But he used to phone me up and ask questions. And the one day the phone went one night, and he says, I have seen in the Dennison book that there is this the tradition of writing down the child's name and pinning it on the shroud. Because Dennison said that in the 1840s, there was a young couple that came to him and asked him to write a name on a bit of paper for them because they were illiterate and the baby had died, and they wanted to pin this to the shroud as what Dennison describes as a passport to paradise, so that the child would be allowed into heaven because it had been given a name. And I thought, that's a kind of one, I can understand that, but, that's long gone. I wouldn't have known anybody that did such a thing. Wrong. My mother told me that my great uncle, Johnny Draver, a.k.a. Trousdale. He was only in West, he was just called Trousdale, which also had something to do with Trows, but it didn't. He was one of twins, born in 1879. He had a twin sister, and the doctor that delivered them was Dr. Trousdale. And he said, I haven't delivered twins before, so could I give my name to one of the children? So he was John Ernest Trousdale Draver. But anyway, he was married, and his wife's parents worked in the kelp, gathering the seaweed and drying it, and then burning it and selling the residue to the chemical industry. In that time, it was for iodine. Before that, it was used in the soap and glass manufacturing industries because it made glass clearer, which meant it was more valuable. But he was, his wife was pregnant, almost full term, and he's in the census as a carter, and he had a horse and cart that he went and delivered goods. He was like the man with the van kind of thing, white van man of the day. So he had to go down to Pierrewell to pick up some stuff that was coming in on the steamer. And he said to his wife, don't go to the kelp today. You're too close to your time. And as soon as he left and was out of sight over the brae, her father made her go down and work in the kelp. And as a result, she had a miscarriage and lost the child. And what they did was he wrote the child's name, George Draver, down on a piece of paper and pinned it to the shroud. And I said to my mother about this whole tradition, and he wouldn't have heard of that. She said, she dismissed that. No, he wouldn't have heard of that. And I thought, well, it's not a coincidence that an old belief like that had been reinvented, But he put up a gravestone to the child in the Pierrewell kirkyard to George Draver, and then, his wife's name was under it, and then his name was... See, he lived to be in his 90s. So I remember him as a very old man when I was a kid. So then suddenly these ancient traditions aren't so ancient.
No. I think they can continue in cut-off places for a long, long time. Bengt Klintberg, a Swedish folklorist, had the expression sort of relikområde, meaning an area where older things live on much longer, and that often applies to islands as much as anything else, rather than to sort of mainland places. But I'm thinking that Onda, you've got me thinking about something else now while we're talking about adaptations to areas, and why the word Trowie coming here. And you've been kindly taking me around so many areas today of these grave mounds and stones and things of this kind. And I think it's quite logical. Why do the Norwegians that come here not talk about land spirits, landvited or hidden ones, which sort of later time words? And I think it's because what they're encountering in the landscape are things that are so big that they're troll created. If you understand what I mean, this is a land made by trolls who live within the landscape, which you don't find in Iceland. You don't find sort of elsewhere, but this is a way of explaining. So in a sense, the spirits that live within the landscape are more trolls than landvited initially. Haugbo is another thing. But even there, they're blending together, as we have the story of the Haugbo creating landscape, which you've told me. Oh, yeah. Well, that was a story. He was meant to be a giant called Hogboy, who was chasing his wife around after having a domestic and throwing stones at her. But luckily, he had a shite aim and kept missing her. So there was a stone at Ramsquay and Dennis that was thrown by him, but there's another one on the road along the side of the Scale Loch, where there is a stone embedded in the banks in this sort of little cliff Yeah.
Which was thrown by him as well. Because I've just been writing a book of Orkney folktales in the landscape, and that was one of them. But I didn't realise which stone it was until I started researching it, and then discovered the name of the road. Because I didn't know the name of the road, and I've forgotten what it is again now, but it's in the book. But that road has got a name.
Right.
And that is where the stone is embedded, and it's like, well, there we go.
Yeah.
There it is, you know.
I think it's exactly, if we go to Denmark and we go to the graves there, sort of dolmen graves, they're called Jættastua, which means a giant room. And in a sense, that's what's happening here. That this is the same sort of thing that they're encountering within the landscape. Who can put this rock up? Who can carry these things?
Yeah.
This is trolls rather than...
Well, we kind of know that the name Traill comes from troll.
Yeah, exactly.
But I often wondered, and I know it's been argued by other people, that trolls and fairies are different things.
Not here, I don't think.
And I can't see any difference between them.
No.
A lot of times fairies are actually referred to as being like quite beautiful, but tiny, but small, you know.
Yeah.
But very attractive, and in some cases rather well dressed, you know, in powder blue outfits.
Yeah.
So that's kind of good to know, because I always had trolls and fairies down as being just two different names for the same thing, and maybe the fairy is more a Scottish name for it.
It's like Alvar and Hultefolk in Iceland, which is badly translated as elves. They're not elves, because our image of elves are sort of little beings popping around with wings on their back, sitting on toadstools. In Iceland, they all look exactly like us. They just look a lot better. They have a sort of... They work out daily. They've got a sort of 7-pack or something, and they look really tough. If it's a woman, if it's a man, I mean, and the women are just very beautiful. But yeah, we have the two words, and I think it's the same here. But of course, when someone from Brighton like me, the word fairy means a sort of winged ballet tutu wearing.
Kind of a Victorian notion of...
Right, these photographs.
And, well, in children's illustrations and children's books.
Right. The fairy, I think, for Orcadians is like an island. It's the supernatural.
Yeah. I always say when I go to schools and tell stories and all about fairies, I said, look, if your idea of a fairy is a small gossamer-winged, wish-granting creature, forget it.
Yeah.
You know, they're dodgy. Steal your kids.
Right.
They'll kill you if you annoy them. Yeah. You know, don't mess with them.
Right. So I think in a sense, a little bit like they come to Iceland, they believe in figures, supernatural figures that they call the Alvar, and that's the word that they apply to these supernatural beings. In a sense, coming here, you can see how there's a sort of blending going on between the trolls and the land spirits and the grave mound dwellers. It's quite natural that it sort of moves. And nowadays in Norway, of course, you have a very similar idea of trolls wearing a sort of Johnny Rotten hairstyle and a tail, very sweet figures.
And on sale everywhere in every single shop in Norway.
Yeah, okay. And the ideas come straight from Orkney when it comes down to it for the trolls of that.
There we are again, at the centre of everything.
Yeah.
God, we're brilliant. You know that we invented sex as well. But no, it's...
now I've gone speechless.
They found two fossil fishes that were from Lake Orkney, from the rocks that Orkney is made of, where they think they were actually copulating for the first time, like sperm being passed into the body rather than on an egg being laid. So we invented sex. You're welcome. Now that's off on a tangent for you.
Well, this is another particularly Icelandic story. I don't know, you may be a bit offended by this. We'll see what happens. The priest disappears every Saturday night. Basically, he should be writing a sermon, and a servant. Where's he going? Where's he go? And so the servant boy follows him up to the hills, the rocks, and sees him sort of disappear into a rock, and the boy sort of follows him inside. And because these are male stories, of course, they step straight into a bedroom, or a couple of bedrooms, where there's an older woman who receives the priest as usual. Nice to see you again. Who's this kid? Of course, send him off with a daughter or something out the back. So the priest disappears, and the young boy is very shocked by all of this and can't perform. And so she throws him out and curses him for the rest of his life because he can't perform. And then the priest just comes back, big smile on his face, and it's that's what he's doing every Saturday instead of preparing his sermon in a different way. But again, Iceland takes, they slip into.
There was a story in a similar vein from Sandy.
Oh, really?
Which there was a minister. Now, there's two versions of the story. The one version, the nice version, is that there was a minister that arrived in Sandy at Lady Kirk. A lady was one of the parishes, and it's named after the dedication of the church to the Virgin Mary. And the minister was so good at preaching a sermon that the devil got curious and wanted to go and lug in and see what he was doing. And on the outside of the building, there is a flight of stone steps that goes up with a stone wall up the side of it. And there's a little kind of platform at the top with a wall around it. And to access the upper floor in the church. And so he was hanging around there listening at the door. And the preacher was preaching such a wonderful sermon. And the devil got so annoyed. He started scraping his claws along the stone. And it's left claw marks in it. If you go up the stone, you can see these claw marks in the top of the stone. Now, the other version, because I'm half Sandy, so I get to hear about these things, is that there was a minister who was a bit of a ladies' man, shall we say, and he was paying a nocturnal visit to one of his friends, and the devil was out to get him because of what he was up to. And he confronts him on his way back, from leaving this house. And he ran to the church with the devil right on his heels. And he manages just to make it to the church and through the door, which, of course, the devil cannot cross. Yep. So he was safe. And the devil was so mad, running around looking for some sort of way in, that up the stairs got so mad, started scratching the stone, and that's how the claw marks got there.
Have you seen the claw marks?
Oh, yeah. No, they're real. Oh, yeah. They're quite deep. And the thing is, there's 6 of them.
Oh, 6 of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Iceland, so the hidden people in Iceland are Christian. And they have their own sort of religion. They also have their own book of the Bible. There's an extra book of Genesis, which tells about Adam and his relationship with Lilith.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the hidden people come from initially. And the problem was for Adam that Lilith was far too interested in sex. He was just getting exhausted by all of this, and he had to get rid of her. While he was waiting to find another lady, he made use of holes in the lava, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody when it comes down to so these odd Icelandic stories are. You're going to have to make this an X certificate program, I think. But you brought this up, not me. But yeah, then Mary comes along and she behaves herself.
Eve.
Eve comes along. Yeah, exactly. But it's quite I was we were in Austria the other day in an art gallery. And usually the picture of them coming out of the Garden of Eden is terribly broken and in pieces. But then there was a picture beside it. They were coming out going, way! We can enjoy ourselves now, which is a totally different image of that. God, maybe it all happened in Orkney.
Well, everything does.
Yeah, I know. Just
Yeah.
so move south, and as you've been showing me today, it all begins up here. Yeah.
Yes. We have our moments.
Yeah.
But
To say the least.
But I mean, I was very intrigued with, you wrote a book about hidden people. And in it you were saying that you reckoned that the reason that they're always depicted as being dressed in sort of very smart national costume from the 19th century was because that's when they started to be drawn in
precisely.
books.
This is the influence of print. An oral story, as we all know, will go on and will go on changing. There's not one version of it is going to be. It's always going to be different. And even if it's the same audience and the same words, it'll be a different story. It'll be received differently. But when a story is suddenly put into print and put as part of a national collection, it stays there. Whereas we go on developing as we know ourselves. So when the books are collected, the hidden people are living inside rocks and hills. But basically, so were human beings. We're living in houses that looked like sort of hobbit houses, like covered with grass, which blended with the landscape. We've gone on developing, but every generation has been reading those stories where they live in that way, where they, in a sense, have national costume. And in a sense, it's a bit like a sepia photograph. They've been caught up in that image. There are a few stories which suggest that they get around otherwise, but I would argue basically that if they've gone on developing like us, they've got 8G telephones. They've got the best satellite television you can imagine. They've got certainly much better books and sort of Kindle things than we have. And they probably live in the cities, like in the being John Malkovich film, between floors, floor 8.5. They just stop on the lift when they want to there. So they're there. But this is the image that they're stuck with, wandering around wearing a national costume, which is a bit of a pity. But that seems to apply also to these family spirits that chase you. Who are described in a lot of detail, a bit like the sea figures here. The clothes that they're wearing when they're seen, but they too are stuck in the original image of old national clothes, which is intriguing in itself.
This is what comes back to what you were saying earlier about the stories, the folktales being collected for nationalistic purposes.
Yes, absolutely.
In the beginning,
absolutely. And that's not the way they were told. They were told in a croft, in the butt of the ben? It's the butt.
A butt and ben. Well, it would have been the butt end.
Yeah, not the bedroom.
Yeah, the ben end was the sort of better room or sleeping room. So the butt's where all the cooking was done. It's where the fire was. Right. So that's where you would be sitting.
And so they're sitting there at a sort of, I don't know, a ceilidh of some version, a bit like Lawrence Tulloch's father. People gathered at the ferry, and people come in, and you're listening to stories. You've got the wind going outside. You've got various sounds, and they're not just talking about a place. They're talking about that place, which everybody knows. And at the end, and there are sounds that have been heard, and a legend, unlike a fairy tale, is told to convince you. It's told to change your sense of reality. And there's all sorts of techniques of doing this, this is what happened to me, and it happened, this person said. And so it functions very differently to the way that it does in a book. Which is why I say often, for looking at what a story performance is like, look at the good stand-up people, like Billy Connolly, for example. Look at how the whole body tells the story. And how he refers to us and draws of us what we know ourselves. So these stories change the landscape. I've described them as being the landscape, the clothes worn by landscape. So in Iceland, somebody goes to a place called Thingvellir, which was the parliament place, and they have no guidebook with them. What they see is a chasm. They see the line between the two plates, the European plate and the American plate. An Icelander who goes there, oops, that was where the witches were drowned. That's where these people were hung. That's where this hero jumped over the water. And again, the story gives the place depth. It tells you where not to go. It tells you how to behave. It's a map of behavior. That if you do this, then you're going to end up in trouble. Like touching one of these sacred sites. This is what will happen. It's teaching as much as anything else, but it gives the landscape a character. And especially when someone like you tells them.
Well, you kind of need to interpret the landscape a bit as well, because, I mean, obviously you see what you see in front of you.
Yeah.
But then if you have, well, that is where this happened or that happened, and, you know, then suddenly it changes. I mean, obviously it doesn't physically change in front of you.
No.
But your impression of it and your interpretation of it.
Right.
The way that you will remember it changes.
Right. And you view it differently when you walk out into it after the storytelling session. This is where this murder took place. And that's never going to be the same again. A particular death occurred here. So these legends are really important. And it's important to bring them back, as we're trying to do with a database, and as you're doing as well, underlining the places where a story takes place. We need to bring them back to the landscape, because they are... The landscape was a book, I think, for all the farmers here, and a book in that sense. It had all of these stories. Wherever you go, it brings a story up. And so, as you've been doing today with me, which is every place we've gone, there's a story coming up here. And this was a book that every island had, every farmer had. And we need to, yes, you can see why they're in books, that's great, but to bring them back to the landscape is important.
Well, I always thought so, but, you know. We were at the Science Festival last night, and you told an intriguing story. I don't know if you fancy sharing that with our listeners as well, because, I mean, it was so weird. I've never heard anything like it.
It's a sort of fragment of a story, but it's told by people living in the south of Iceland. And down in the south of Iceland, we have these long stretches of very pitch black sand, which are volcanic sand, and it comes down from some of the volcanoes at the back, like Katla and other ones. And these beaches are places where people did go out fishing in rowing boats. And to set the scene at least, imagine the long beach. Imagine behind the beach a sort of line of mountains and even a glacier up there. And at the bottom of the beach are these pounding breakers. And walking down there myself, you think about, what does the wife think every day when her husband is going to go out there? It's a little bit like the legend says, well, the time has come, but not the man, which you've got one of those here, that they're waiting for the next sacrifice to a certain extent. So it's a really eerie place to be walking along, and a lot of ships have been shipwrecked on this area, and it was very difficult to land a rowing boat without being turned over, and everybody gets drowned. So when you walk along there is a sense of death, without any question. There's a sense of fate walking along this beach. Slowly you can hear your feet making the sound in the sand. And the story tells basically how this person was walking along one of these beaches. And then as he's going along, suddenly his foot bumps into something. And so what is it? And in the darkness, he sort of feels down to what this is. And you can feel hair. And you feel sort of around it, it turns into a sort of body, and you go, and it's got legs too. And then you take the arm and you move your hand up the arm, and then you reach these claws on the end of the arm, and immediately, what are you going to do about this? Because the rule is you have to take anybody you find on the beach to the church. You've got to pick it up, carry it. And what is this thing? Is it a monkey? What's it doing up here? Is it they think it might be a hound Turk, one of these horrible beings from down the south that kidnap Icelanders? Yeah. Or the devil, or what on earth is it? And so he gets help, and they sort of drag this being along to the church, and then the next day, because that's the rule, you've got to take anybody to the church, because they for an Icelander, that's where your family is, that's where you want to be. Foreigners, it's more problematic because they want to be at home. But okay, we're going to find a church for this being. And they put it into a coffin, and they bring it into the church, and then they rather uncomfortably, nervously gather in the church, still not showing what this thing can be. And then they open their hymnals, and all of the words are back to front. Nothing makes any sense. It's like having an appalling dyslexia when it comes down to it. You can't read anything here. So open to the next page, and exactly the same. All of the words are muddled up. Give up on singing. Okay, priest, say something. He stands up in the pulpit, opens his mouth, and out come a whole line of swear words. And he's trying to say something holy, and all that comes out are swear words. It just gets worse and worse, and in the end they just give up on this and bury this being out in the churchyard and go back home. And then a few days later, somebody else is wandering near the church and hears the sound of just crashing, banging and crashing and things going on in the church, creeps up to the church wall, looks over, and then what he can see is this hairy being is sort of raised from its grave and is taking the planks from the coffin and is whacking the side of the church with it and just runs for it. The guy runs for it to get away from this. This is just horrific. What do we do with this figure? And all the time onwards, from that time onwards, people still talk about this being a really risky place to walk at night time along this beach, because so many people have been led astray when they're walking along the beach, and they're never found again. They just get caught up in the breakers, or they just disappear. And this is all because of the hairy man of Skarði who caused this. And nobody knows what the being was, but he's still lurks. He never wanted to be buried out there.
Oh, yeah, I think I've been to that beach. I've certainly been to one beach that was very long and black.
He's a brave man, isn't he? Yeah.
Oh, I said I had been to the beach, not on the beach. But
No, I love it. There are some wonderful stories about washed up bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And the special thing about them in Iceland is that if it's a washed up body of an Icelander, usually somebody will dream of them and they'll say where they are to be got into the churchyard.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting is that the same happens with the Faroese. If it's a Faroese drowned person, they'll contact an Icelander and say where they are, because it's a very similar language.
Mm-hmm.
More problematic with foreigners, partly because the big difficulty is that they'd find a dead body on the beach, and they would have a sort of sailor's uniform on with really good buttons, and the worst and the best thing is that they had great boots.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the do you feel lucky punk question. Am I going to take the boot? Would he mind if I take his boots? And then usually in the story, you'll wake up in the night and you hear the sound of dripping beside your bed. Give me my boots back. And sort of, so yeah, foreigners you don't dream of.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was one guy who was buried in a churchyard, and he'd been there, I think, for about 30, 40 years. And then somebody dreamt of him coming and saying, thank you for rescuing me. But he'd been learning Icelandic in the graveyard.
Wow.
That was,
Wow.
that was, he could last speak and be welcomed in.
Oh. You know, Lawrence had a story, Lawrence Tulloch in Shetland had a story that was very similar to, what he was saying about there was a cargo of timber being washed in, I think it was on Fettler, and they were down on the shore gathering all this wood in and going into the sea as deep as they could with a rope around their middle and pulling in all this wood.
Yeah.
And then there was, they found this one piece of wood, and the guy pulled it towards him and came face to face with a corpse who was hanging on to it. He'd been hanging on to this piece of wood when he drowned. And so that just, I mean, it was getting dark, but that just put the kibosh on it for them. You know, they said, right, we have to bury this man.
Yeah.
Now, here, you didn't take bodies to the church. You buried them next to the shore.
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa, okay.
You didn't know who the person was. You didn't know what religion they were, so you didn't want to take them into the graveyard. Also, it was believed that the sea it took its prey.
Yes.
And if you were to deprive the sea of its prey by taking a body away from it and taking it to a church, the sea would try to get into the kirkyard.
Wow.
And to get the body back. And then your ancestors, who are nice and dry in their grave, would all get soggy as well. So you buried, bodies were always buried by the shore. And so they dug a grave and they lined it with wood, because there was so much wood had come ashore. They lined it with wood, and they put the man in it, and they put wood over the top of it and filled it in. But the one guy had been staring at the man's boots. And he said, that would fit me. I'm going to have those. And he went, no, you're not. You do not steal from the dead.
No.
And so buried the man. They all went home. That night, the guy sneaked back down with a spade, dug the grave up, stole the boots, filled in the grave again, went home, and thought, I can't start wearing these boots because everybody will know where I got them from. But if I stash them away for about a year or so, then people will have forgotten, and I'll get off with it. So he took them into the barn and he hid them under a pile of straw. And then that night when he was in the barn working, thrashing sheaves, then his collie lamp, the old oil lamp, suddenly went out. And he thought, it's the wick, So he went and he relit it again, and then it went out. And he went to the house and came back with a new wick and put it in the lamp and lit it, and it was fine. And then it started to flicker again. And he looked at it, and there was a hand came through the door and was playing with flame on the lamp, and then snuffed it out. So he went outside to see who this was, and there, in the moonlight, he saw the figure of the man. And he said, I want my boots back. And so the man ran over to where he'd hid them, and he took the boots back and offered them to the man. And he said, that's no good to me. I can't carry them. You have to put them back on.
And put them on.
So he had to go back down, dig the grave up again, and replace the boots back on the feet of the corpse, and then fill it in. Fill in the grave again. And they said that after that, he would never interfere or steal from the dead.
Yeah. But you have, there's this regular comment that between the high tide and the low tide shoreline, that this is a risky place to be.
Liminal space. It's neither one thing or another. It's not part of the sea. It's not part of the land.
No.
And that was supposed to be the reign of the realm of the devil and supernatural creatures.
Yeah, exactly. That's I've not seen that anywhere else. But again, this is the sea for Orcadians that I find very interesting.
Well, maybe it was just the fact that, like Shetlanders were fishermen with plows, whereas Orcadians were farmers with a boat. So farming, because the soil here is so much more fertile than in Shetland, because of the rock, because of the sandstone rock. That's the base of here, rather than the igneous volcanic rock in Shetland.
Right. Yeah.
And so we didn't rely on the sea as much.
No.
But I think some of the stories about Finn folk and all never turn you back to the sea. So Finn man will come out and grab you and pull you away.
Absolutely.
It's a good way of keeping you away from danger.
Yeah. That brings us back to the Finn folk. What is the Finn? What the Finn of the Finn folk? Because you have your own feelings about what Finn means?
Well, I mean, I think like yourself, from what I was saying the other night, that they are a reference to the Sami, because the Vikings that came here, if they had an old story about these people that live in the sea who are great sorcerers.
Yes.
And then they go, sorcerers, say, oh, like Finns. So they referred to the Sami as Finns.
Mm.
And they were always supposed to be, great sorcerer. So it was just applying a name that made sense to you for what you understood to something else, in a new country, a new place.
Right. No, exactly. And I think, again, we have something that's developing over the course of time, gaining fins to a certain extent as well, because of people misunderstanding the word or not knowing where it comes from. And something to just looking at these graves today and the idea of beings living in the ground. I'm looking at Viking age graves in Iceland, and you go to the performance of the funeral. You go there, you carry the body up from the farm, you put them into the ground, and everybody who's there knows exactly what she looks like in the ground, or he looks like. They know where the head is, they know where the feet are, they know what objects are in there. You then cover them over, and everybody who walks by there sees them still. They're there, but they're not there anymore. Do you understand what I mean? Because they have a visual memory of something within the landscape that's not there anymore because of their memory. And they'll tell the next generation there is a girl inside the landscape there which looks like this. And again, the landscape is beginning to be populated more and more by living beings, in a sense. And it's a little bit like here that they're closely connected to the fairies. In Iceland, yes, originally, yes, the hidden people. But the dead living within the ground, the seen but unseen within the landscape. And it's changing the landscape completely. There's a body under the earth looking like this. And I think that you get a creation of memories everywhere of all of these bodies within the landscape below the grass, but they are there, but they aren't. But people have seen them; they can describe what they look like. And I think that's that's going to be the same here too, to a certain extent. All of these beings living within the grave mounds.
Yeah,
but it's
Any other kind of things that you would like to say before we wrap it up for the...
No, just thanks for inviting me here, and thanks for this discussion. And,
well, thank you.
Just the joy of these stories, which are it couldn't come from anywhere else when it comes down to it. They underline shared connections, but they've all become something that is different to other places and a joy. So thank you for the Mermaid Bride and for everything else.
We need to say a big thank you to Walter Traill Dennison
200
for the guy that gathered them and wrote them down in the first place. Because I mean, the longest and most detailed folktales we have comes from Dennison,
right?
And so we owe him a great debt of gratitude.
Right.
And as I said, this is bicentenary. His birth on the 6th of October, 1825. And I think our next Hour with the Moon is on the 6th of October. It's on the 7th. Oh, so it's the day after. Okay.
So check out our database as well, which is Sagnagrunnet, Orkney. And that's dedicated. And it's nice that it's coming out now. It's open now. It's on the 200th anniversary. And dedicated to Walter Traill Dennison and Bo Armquist and the magnificent Mr. Muir.
Why? Well, that's a great honour, I'll tell you. I'm speechless. Christ, that doesn't happen very often.
Oh, there you go.
But Well, Terry, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me here and educating me.
Well, and tomorrow we'll have more trips around and see more places and have a good old time.
Very much look forward to it. Yeah. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you, folk, for listening. And good night. And take care of yourselves.